A struggling single dad, once an auto mechanic, helps a woman during a storm. Unaware she is the CEO of an automotive company fighting to build a better, greener future. Through quiet kindness and shared dreams, they form a family, rediscover love, and together create an eco-friendly car that serves both heart and planet. It's a tender reminder that good people still shape the world, one act of grace at a time. If you're looking for such heartwarming stories, please subscribe. There are more to follow. The wind had begun to whisper its cold secrets before the first snowflake fell. Soft, hesitant, almost shy, as if the sky itself was nervous to disturb the quiet of the evening. Howard Murphy felt it in his bones, the sharp bite of winter creeping through the thin fabric of his jacket as he pulled the collar higher around his neck. The diner's neon sign flickered behind him, casting a pale, tired glow over the empty parking lot, a lonely beacon for those still awake. He held Liliana's small hand tightly in his, the child's warmth a fragile island in the cold. Her eyes were wide with tired wonder, watching the snow begin to drift down, swirling like soft whispers in the darkening air. "Daddy, will the snow stay?" she asked, voice small and hopeful. Howard squeezed her hand gently. "For a little while," he said. His voice was rough from years of late-night shifts and swallowed words, but gentle now, like a quiet promise. The diner had been a cage disguised as a livelihood. The owner, a gruff man named Carl, short, bald, with a permanent scowl etched deep into his skin, was a storm of his own making. Carl's words were sharp, cutting Howard down day after day, piling on more hours, more plates, more unspoken expectations. But Howard never lost his quiet dignity. He worked with soft humility that didn't ask for pity, only the grace of a hard day done well. The regulars, a patchwork of lonely souls and tired workers, smiled at him. They saw in Howard something rare. Kindness worn like armor, resilience whispered in every polite nod. Once, long ago, Howard had owned a small auto repair shop. It smelled of grease and dreams, of metal singing under steady hands. That was before the cancer took his wife, before the final wrench turned into business, slipping through his fingers like sand. The memory of her laugh still flickered in the corners of his mind, fragile as frost on a window pane. Losing her had shattered something too deep to mend, but Liliana, his little star, was a thread holding him steady in the unraveling. The wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of the storm. Howard's boots crunched in thin layer of snow that had settled on the roadside when he spotted her, a lone figure struggling beside a dark, lifeless car. The headlights were out, swallowed by the evening gloom. She was bent over the engine, her breath visible in the freezing air, a frantic dance of hands and wrench. Without hesitation, Howard slowed and pulled over, the truck's engine rumbling against the silence. "Need a hand?" His voice was soft, a steady anchor in the chaos of the coming blizzard. She looked up, startled, eyes wide and wary. "I don't think it'll start. The storm's coming fast." Howard nodded, already stepping out into the snow. The cold bit his fingers, but the years of working on stubborn engines gave him practice calm. He knelt by the car, hands moving with the memory of a life once lived, the delicate balance of wires, the steady pulse of mechanical heartbeats. Liliana watched from the warmth of the truck's cabin, her small face pressed against the fog glass, eyes wide with mixture of curiosity and hope. "It's a little cold to be out here, don't you think?" Howard said softly, more to himself than anyone else. His voice carried a faint, weary humor. "Used to be I'd spend hours in a shop just like this, chasing down ghosts in the engine." She smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a bit. "You're good at this." Howard shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Used to be." The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared softly back to life. The car blinked its lights, a flicker of hope in the gathering night. The woman's relief was palpable, a fragile thing that fluttered like a bird in a cage. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into his hand. "Please let me pay you. It's not much, but—" Howard shook his head, eyes warm but firm. "No need. Just be safe out there. The storm will settle soon enough." He looked toward the horizon where the snow was already thickening, swallowing the edges of the road in silent white. "Come inside," he said. "Wait with us until it passes. It's safer." She hesitated, the weight of pride and fear pressing down, but something in Howard's quiet steadiness softened her. "Okay," she whispered. Inside Howard's small home, the fire sputtered low on the hearth, casting flickering shadows on worn wooden walls. Liliana's laughter broke the silence, a gentle melody weaving through the stillness. The woman sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes tracing the dancing flames. The house was humble, scuffed floors, mismatched furniture, but it held warmth, not just from the fire, but from something deeper, something raw and real. Howard moved quietly, preparing cups of tea, the ritual of small kindnesses grounding the moment. Liliana climbed into the woman's lap, her small fingers tracing patterns on the fabric of the blanket. "What's your name?" she asked shyly. The woman's smile was soft, almost sad. "Claire," she said. "Claire Blake." Howard felt a quiet shift in the room, a subtle thread weaving tighter between them. Yet Claire said no more of herself. The name hung in the air like a secret waiting to be unfolded. Outside, the storm whispered louder now, snowflakes swirling in frantic patterns against the window pane. The world beyond was cold and uncertain, but inside, the warmth of fragile, new connection held firm. Howard watched Claire, saw the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of hope and fear mingling in her gaze. He knew loss, knew the ache of shattered dreams, and he sensed that Claire carried her own burdens, heavy and silent. As the fire crackled, casting its golden light, Howard felt the quiet power of this moment, of kindness given without expectation, of strangers becoming something more, even if only for a night. The clock ticked softly, marking time in a world paused between storms. Liliana yawned, curling against her father's side, safe and warm. Claire's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Howard." He smiled, the weight of the day lifting just enough to breathe again. "No thanks needed. Just glad you're here." And in that simple truth, beneath the falling snow and the watching stars, something fragile began to grow, a seed of second chances, watered by quiet kindness and the hope of found family. The snow had already started to melt by the time Claire Blake returned to the city, but the memory of that night stayed frozen inside her, untouched, crystalline, held close like something too rare to be disturbed. She hadn't meant to linger. It was supposed to be a moment. Car trouble, kindness, thank you, goodbye. But Howard Murphy's voice still echoed in her thoughts, quiet, steady, like a lantern in a storm. And Liliana, sweet Liliana with her wild curls and bedtime questions and fearless laughter in a house too small for dreams but large enough to hold warmth. Claire had watched the way Howard moved, calm even in the harshest cold, his hands sure, his words measured. She had seen what the world overlooked. A man not broken by hardship, but softened into something enduring. And for reasons she couldn't name, she wasn't ready to forget. The office smelled like glass and silence when she stepped into it again. Everything was polished, efficient, and just slightly too cold. Claire wore her father's legacy like a coat a size too big, tailored for someone larger, bolder, less inclined to listen to snowstorms and bedtime stories. She closed the door behind her, letting the city fall away. A photograph rested beside her computer. Her father, smiling beside an early prototype of a car they never finished. Eco-efficient, affordable, a dream he called the everyman's racehorse. He used to say a good car should never be about status. It should be about soul. Claire sat down slowly and stared at the blueprint drawer beneath her desk. She hadn't opened it in months. Her hand moved almost without thought, slipping into her coat pocket and brushing against a folded napkin she'd written a number on. Howard's number. He never asked for hers. Later that night, while the city lights blinked quietly against the fog glass of her apartment window, Claire wrote a letter. It wasn't long, just a few lines. To whom it may concern, I'd like to personally recommend Mr. Howard Murphy for an open technician's role at Blake Automotive. He may not come with paperwork, but he comes with character. She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. She handed it to Thomas during the weekly staffing review. He glanced at the envelope, then at her, his brow slightly raised. No CV? Claire smiled faintly. Sometimes paper can't measure worth. He didn't ask more. 2 weeks passed. Claire stayed silent. She told herself it was better that way. If he didn't know it was her, he wouldn't feel obligated, wouldn't feel watched. Let the world meet Howard on its own terms. And meet him they did. In the manufacturing wing of Blake Automotive, under harsh fluorescent lights and the low hum of machines, a quiet shift began. No one expected much from the new guy. He was older than most, wore flannel, carried a lunch in a tin box with his daughter's sticker doodles on the side. Some laughed, but he worked like the machines were old friends. He listened more than he spoke. And when a faulty module shut down line 3 one afternoon, it was Howard who knelt beneath the console and found the issue in less than 5 minutes. "I used to speak engine," he murmured, almost to himself. "Guess I never forgot the accent." By the end of the week, the others had stopped laughing. Howard never asked who sent the letter. But sometimes at night, after Liliana had fallen asleep with a book across her chest, he'd sit by the window, watch the snow melt on the street below, and wonder about the woman with tired eyes and elegant silence. Claire, who never spoke much, but had somehow spoken volumes. In the boardroom above, Claire watched his progress on reports and logs. His name was there, climbing slowly, not because she pushed, but because he rose, on his own, quietly, with the same grace he used to pour Liliana a cup of cocoa. But things weren't calm everywhere. The company, her father's company, was under siege, though no one said it out loud. Competing firms were snapping at their heels, launching faster cars with flashier marketing and smaller consciences. Blake Automotive had lost its place in the spotlight. Claire didn't care for the spotlight. She cared for legacy. One evening, under the soft buzz of her desk lamp, she opened the blueprint drawer. Her father's design stared up at her, sketched by hand, the corners worn from years of being unfolded and dreamed over. "An eco-racer," he'd said, tapping the page. "Fast enough to race, light enough to breathe. For the kid who wants to win, but still has chores after." Claire laid her palm over the paper, like a promise. She called the board in the next day. They sat around the long glass table like they always did, all suits and coffee breath and practiced nods. She laid the blueprints down in the center. "This is what we build next." Silence followed, then murmurs, questions, doubts. Thomas was the first to speak. "Claire, these designs are outdated. They're romantic, but we're in a war." She met his gaze calmly. "Then let's fight with something worth building." Eventually, they agreed. Slowly, with caveats. They gave her a team, a budget, a deadline. Claire stepped out of that meeting feeling like her lungs had cleared for the first time in months. She made one more call that night, anonymous, through company channels. The next morning, Howard was reassigned. They told him he was being moved for evaluation purposes to a higher-level engineering floor. He didn't question it, just packed his lunch tin and nodded politely. But that night, he sat longer by the window, staring at the moon with his brow furrowed. A new floor, a new start, and 100 unspoken questions. Claire watched him from afar, watched as he slipped into the project team like he'd always been there. He didn't try to lead, didn't try to impress. He just worked, thoughtfully, carefully, as if the machines had feelings. But not everyone was pleased. Thomas had been with the company since before Claire's father passed. He'd been loyal, skilled, and quietly bitter. He'd asked Claire to dinner once. She'd declined, politely, firmly. The distance had grown after that. When he saw Howard in the project meeting, the man with no resume, no history, no pedigree, something in him curled into resentment. It was subtle at first. Missing files, delayed memos, minor errors that led to questioning glances. Howard never complained. He fixed what he could, and when he couldn't, he apologized as if the fault were his. Claire knew, but she stayed silent, watching, waiting, hoping Howard would rise the same way he always had, on his own. One late night, after the office had emptied and the machines had gone quiet, Claire walked into the test bay. Howard was there, alone, sketching something in a worn notebook by the engine light. She stood behind him silently until he sensed her. He didn't turn. "I thought I was done drawing these," he said softly. Claire took a step closer. Is it yours? He nodded. She waited. He finally looked up, the engine light casting half his face in shadow. It was a dream before. She took the notebook gently, turned the page, and there was a car not just made of steel but of soul. Light, efficient, fast, but simple, real. Claire felt the breath leave her chest. You built this, she whispered. Only in my head, he said. Didn't think anyone would care anymore. She looked at him then, truly looked, saw not a man fixing what was broken, but a man who never stopped building, even when everything else fell apart. May I show this to the team? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded. The next morning, Claire placed Howard's design beside her father's, and for the first time, the room fell into quiet admiration, not for the numbers, not for the margins, but for the heart behind the metal. And still, Howard never asked how he got there. He only said thank you. That night, Claire received a message from him. Just one sentence. Your kindness gave me back a piece of myself I thought was gone. She read it once, then again, and in the quiet of her office, with snow beginning to fall again outside the tall glass windows, Claire whispered to the empty room, You gave me one, too. The engine room glowed like a low-burning hearth, casting warm amber shadows against the cold steel bones of progress. Outside, the snow had returned. Not a storm this time, but a hush, soft and steady, like breath over sleep. Howard leaned over the hood of the prototype, hands greased, brow furrowed in silent concentration. His coat hung nearby, damp from the walk. A thermos of cocoa, lukewarm now, sat untouched on the workbench beside a crayon-drawn note from Liliana. Go fast, Daddy, but safe. A heart, a sun, a stick-figure car with wings. Claire stood quietly at the far end of the room, arms folded, watching the way he gently tapped the frame, like it might answer him. She hadn't told him everything yet. Not about Thomas. Not about the board. Not about how every email seemed to carry a quiet tension now, like a note played just a hair off key. They'd begun to meet after hours, not in secret, but in stillness, a shared silence that didn't need naming. They worked well together. She brought theory. He brought instinct. Together. The lines of her father's dream began to breathe again. Some nights, Liliana came too. Curled up in a corner with a coloring book and her stuffed rabbit, she would hum softly under her breath as the adults labored like quiet blacksmiths of the future. Claire had started bringing her little things. New markers, fruit snacks, a hair clip shaped like a tiny wrench. I think she likes you, Howard had said once, eyes soft with something more than amusement. Claire had smiled. I think I like her back. The bond between them hadn't happened all at once. It had built slowly, like the soft layering of snow. A shared joke, a sleeve rolled up for work. The way Claire once reached across the table and brushed a strand of greased dark hair from Howard's forehead without thinking. He hadn't moved, just closed his eyes for a breath, as if her hand had reminded him he was still seen. But beneath that gentle rhythm, something darker stirred. Thomas had started to make calls. Small ones, quiet ones, but pointed. He said the company was losing focus, that decisions were being made on sentiment, not strategy, that a man with no formal training, no credentials, no board approval, was leading a project meant to save them. A man, he hinted, who shared late nights with the CEO. Claire heard the murmurs before she saw the damage. At the weekly briefing, 2 chairs sat conspicuously empty. The chief engineer, citing concerns about direction, had taken leave. Another, formerly eager about the project, now spoke in cautious hedging. Howard didn't say anything, but his smile faltered more often. Claire tried to reassure him. You're here because you earned it. He looked down. That's not what people think. She touched his hand then. Quick, quiet, just enough. Let them talk. I know it's true. Still, the weight began to gather. One evening, Liliana handed Claire a folded piece of paper with stars drawn all around the edges. It's a wish letter, she said, serious as ever. I wrote it at school. Claire unfolded it gently. I wish my daddy could build happy cars again. I wish Mommy could see them. I wish people would stop being mean when someone is kind. Claire blinked once, twice, folded the letter back, and held it to her chest. We're working on it, she whispered. Promise. That night, she sat beside Howard on the hood of the prototype, feet swinging like children at a dock. Do you ever feel like life gave you two halves and forgot to send the glue? Howard chuckled softly. Every morning. She turned her head. What kept you going? He thought for a long time. Then there's a photograph. My wife, right after Liliana, was born. She's holding her like she's made of glass and gold. I look at it when I forget why I'm still standing. Claire nodded. He looked at her, the shadows softening the lines on his face. What about you? She hesitated. Then there's a note. My dad wrote it before he passed. It just says, keep the heart in the machine. They sat in silence after that. And silence was what Thomas feared most. That calm, that bond, that growing thing he couldn't quantify. So he acted. One morning, a glossy envelope appeared on Claire's desk. Inside, a blurry photo from a parking garage. Two figures. One, unmistakably her. The other, Howard, close enough to cast one shadow. A note attached. Optics matter. Choose wisely. She said nothing, but she kept the photo. Later that day, she called Howard to her office. He looked wary, tired around the eyes. Did I do something wrong? He asked. No, she said gently. But there are people who think we did. He watched her a long moment. Why did you bring me in? He asked finally. She breathed, slow and steady. Because you reminded me what honesty sounds like. Because you build things with soul. Because I was cold, and you made room at your table. He swallowed, looked away. I don't want to be a problem, he said. You're not, she replied. But still, he pulled back. He stopped coming by the office, stopped staying late, and Liliana stopped bringing her rabbit. Claire felt the distance like a draft through a cracked window, subtle but constant. Their car, still progressed, still turned heads in hushed meetings, but it moved without the laughter, without the warmth. Then, one evening, she found a blueprint notebook on her desk. No note, just the drawings. She sat with it for hours, touching each line like a Braille prayer. She knew then, this wasn't just his work, it was his goodbye. The next morning, she went to the diner. It was early, barely dawn, and the world was still wrapped in frost. Inside, the owner barked something rude, but she ignored him. Howard was at the counter, pouring coffee with his back to her. She slid onto a stool. He didn't turn. I missed the cocoa, she said softly. He froze, then looked over his shoulder, startled. Claire? She nodded. I needed to talk, away from the machines. He set the pot down, sat beside her. She reached into her coat, pulled out the folded letter from Liliana. I found this, she said. I think it belongs to both of us. His hands trembled slightly as he took it. I don't care what Thomas says, she added, or the board, or the whispers. You belong, not just in the garage, but in the story. He blinked hard. It's not about them. It's about me. I'm just a guy who fixes things. I'm not built for boardrooms. Claire leaned in. Then let's fix the room. He laughed, wet-eyed. She placed the blueprint notebook between them. Come back. As a partner, not a project. And for the first time in weeks, he nodded. I'm in, he said. Later. As she stood to leave, he called out, voice quieter than before. Claire. She turned. Thank you for seeing me when I didn't know I was still visible. She smiled and walked into the snow, a little lighter. That night, a letter was slipped under her office door, in careful handwriting. A heart can't be measured in metrics, but it builds better engines. The racetrack slept beneath a veil of winter morning mist, its concrete curves softened by frost and silence. The stands were still empty, the sky a pale watercolor blue and ash. In the pit, beneath the low hum of generators and quiet shuffle of technicians, the prototype sat waiting, its silver frame gleaming like breath-caught midair. Howard stood beside it, gloved hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, chin lifted to the sky. The wind tugged at the collar of his jacket, but he didn't flinch. He had spent years beneath harsher storms. Claire approached from behind, her boots crunching gently on the gravel. In her arms, a folded blanket, a thermos, and Liliana's rabbit. Howard looked over his shoulder and smiled, not wide, just enough to be real. She handed him the thermos. I made it like she does. 3 spoons of cocoa won a quiet hope. He took it, hands lingering against hers for a second longer than necessary. Nearby, Liliana sat cross-legged on a thick blanket, sketching a race car with wings and a tiny stuffed rabbit in the passenger seat. She waved when Claire looked her way. She said she wanted to be an engineer, Claire whispered, as if not to break the spell. Howard smiled. Guess she found her tribe. The car had taken form over months, not just in steel and wire, but in forgiveness and trust. Howard had brought designs, old ones, scribbled years ago in a shoebox he'd hidden after his wife's passing. Claire had pushed for their inclusion, citing their honesty, their humanity. Together, they had shaped a machine that wasn't just fast, but kind. Kind to the world, kind to the people building it, kind to the dream that started it all. But not everyone had cheered. Thomas had made one last play. A quiet leak to the press, a rumor spun of impropriety, favoritism, shadow deals between the grieving mechanic and the CEO. He thought it would be enough to unravel everything. Instead, it brought clarity. Claire had faced the board with the rumor in one hand and Liliana's letter in the other. This, she'd said, holding the crumpled school paper dream in the air, is what we are. This is why we build. And when she turned to Howard, who stood at the back of the room, spine straight, jaw set, there had been no shame between them, just shared ground. The board voted to move forward. Not unanimously, but enough. And Thomas? He resigned 2 days later, leaving only the faint scent of old resentment behind him. Now, as the crowd began to trickle into the stands, Howard stared at the track like it was a road he'd walked before in a dream. The car, theirs, was ready, sleek, silent, coiled like a secret. Claire stepped beside him. We're not here to win, she said. He nodded. We're here to arrive. The race wasn't a grand one, just a demonstration, a glimpse at what the future could be. Electric, yes. Fast, yes. But more than that, soulful. Built not by giants, but by people who remembered loss, who believed in better. Howard climbed into the driver's seat, fingers grazing the wheel like a familiar hand. Claire stepped back, touching the frame once before the engine hummed to life. The car took off, not with a roar, but with a whisper, a gliding, graceful movement, like a sigh turned tangible. Liliana clapped from the blanket, her stuffed rabbit waving beside her. The audience leaned in. It wasn't the fastest car on the track, but it was the one everyone remembered. Afterward, when the run was done and the applause faded into casual conversation, Claire found Howard standing alone beside the empty vehicle. His gloves were off, his eyes rimmed red, not from wind, but something quieter. She walked to him, silent. He turned slowly, held something out, a photo, faded at the edges. His wife, holding a newborn, her eyes tired but glowing. I used to think I had to bury this part of me to move forward, he said. Now, I think it's the reason I still can. Claire took the photo in both hands, held it like a prayer. She would be proud, she whispered. Howard nodded. She is. They stood that way for a while, until Liliana ran up and wrapped herself around her father's waist. Daddy, she whispered. We flew. He laughed, scooped her up. Claire watched them, a warmth blooming inside her chest that had nothing to do with the thermos. Later that evening, back at the garage, Claire lit the old fireplace in the office. A ritual now. The room smelled of oil and cedar. She pulled out a small box from beneath her desk, a box marked in her father's handwriting. She opened it slowly. Inside, a pocket watch, a small stack of notes, and a metal key engraved with the words, Heart First. She set the key on the table, waited. Howard walked in 10 minutes later, rubbing his hands. I thought you went home, he said. I did, she replied, but I wanted to leave something behind. He looked at the key, then at her. She reached for his hand, slipped the key into his palm. "This is your place now, too." He stared at it. "Claire." She stopped him with a look. "No more second-guessing. No more shrinking. You don't need to earn this twice." A silence passed between them, heavy and warm. Then he said softly, "Do you believe in starting again?" She smiled. "No, I believe in continuing with someone." Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, no one was afraid. The garage lights glowed like lanterns against the evening frost. Liliana's drawings were taped to the wall, beside blueprints and sketches and letters never sent. A place not just for machines, but for memory. That night, Howard tucked Liliana into bed at the garage's upstairs loft. Her favorite spot now. Close to the cars, close to him. She clutched her rabbit, half asleep. "Did we win today?" she murmured. Howard brushed her hair back gently. "Yes," he said, "we did." And as she drifted into dreams, he stepped back into the office where Claire waited, a soft record playing in the background. Old jazz, the kind that filled the silence rather than replaced it. They sat together by the fire, no words needed, just the quiet. And in that quiet, something grew. Not a finish line, a beginning. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.